Trump the peace president? So I'd like to welcome in founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University, Jamil Jaffer. Jamil, thank you again for your time. I think we're going to continue to take this live look there at the Knesset as we do wait for President Trump's remarks. But again, we're seeing people with those hats. Would we be here without President Trump, in your opinion?
Well, Nicole, look, it's hard to imagine without the whole Trump team, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, this vision that they had in the first Trump administration for the Abraham Accords, getting those successfully done, and then the vision that was ultimately disrupted by the October 7th attacks of getting Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel. I do think that in a lot of ways that does deserve credit for the Trump administration, the first administration, and now this second. She had all the bodies that will come presumably later today, bringing what looks like potentially an end to this conflict. If, in fact, that results in the end of this 2-year-long war, 738 days long, with huge losses, and if it leads to a long-term peace, I do think, Nicole, that is something that probably deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. President Trump has been, sort of angling for a while. But if you can bring peace to the Middle East, as the phrase goes, it is a pretty big deal.
And these are buses there at those hostages that are now being returned to Israel as we take a live look there. Jamil, when we saw President Trump enter the Knesset, he signed the guest book there saying it is his great honor. It's a great and beautiful day, a new beginning. Would you call this a new beginning?
Well, a lot to see what happens here in the next few hours and days and weeks to come. But it very well could be. Obviously the October 7th terrorist attacks, horrific. The equivalent of a dozen 9/11 attacks on the United States on a population-adjusted basis in a single day. The losses in Gaza, massive civilian losses. If you believe the numbers, in the tens of thousands of civilians killed, and obviously tons of Hamas fighters, which is a victory for global security and peace. We've seen the decimation of Hezbollah around the region. We've seen Iran made largely irrelevant in terms of its support for terrorist proxies. Yemeni Houthis in more of a box than we've ever seen before. Syria fundamentally changed. So in a lot of ways, this may very well be a new day if, in fact, what we see is a cessation of these hostilities, a return to some level of normalcy, a rebuilding of Gaza, a security for Israel, a place for the Palestinians, and ultimately and a recognition of Israel by Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern nations. That could be a massively new day in the Middle East if, in fact, those things happen.
And, Jamil, what do you think we'll hear from President Trump, from Prime Minister Netanyahu, when these remarks begin?
Well, this is a really interesting piece of the story, Nicole. Just in the last few hours, you've had Prime Minister Netanyahu saying the military conflict is not over. President Trump on Air Force One saying the war is ended. So we'll see what they both say at this meeting of the Knesset. I think President Trump will probably, rightfully at least, maybe a little early on, but take something of a victory lap, claim credit, which I think he deserves some significant amount of. Prime Minister Netanyahu will be more cautious. He'll say, look, there's a lot to remain to be determined. Will Hamas disarm? Will there be long-term security for Israel? But I think everyone will be very excited and celebratory today about the return of these hostages alive, the remaining 20 that were in Gaza until today. And then hopefully over the next few days, the remaining 26 to 28 bodies of unfortunately deceased hostages. And then the next withdrawal of the Israelis to the next line, and then eventually a complete cessation of the hostilities there in the region.
All right, Jamil Jaffer, I really appreciate your time. Jamil, thank you. As we head to break, we were giving